not sure how much I understood. I was a kid, after all. But it was a different world. It wasn't from this world, Auschwitz. It never occurred to us that there's a possibility that my parents will not be there. Which is interesting, because amongst all this death and horror and torture and murder, it never occurred to us that my parents will not be there when we come back. And that's not only us, but that's how people survived, by believing that they will find their families when it's all over. And that kept you going. Hope keeps you going. My name is Mrta Wייס, now Wise. I was born in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia, in 1934 to an Orthodox Jewish family. My father's name was Wייs. He was a Slovak, born in Czechoslovakia, in Trnava, and lived all his life in Slovakia. And my mother's maiden name was Kerpel from Mattersburg in Austria. My parents had 9 children, 1 son and the others were all girls. 5 of them were born before the war, 3 during the war, and 1 after the war. We lived in a beautiful house in Palisady Street in Bratislava, opposite the President's Palace. It was a 3-story building which my father bought, and he brought his parents, who were Slovak, I think 10th generation Slovak Jews, from a place where they lived, a small place, and I lived in the mezzanine. We lived on the 1st floor. I'm the 4th of 9 children, and my uncle David and his wife Frida and their 4 children lived on the 2nd floor, and we had a very happy childhood. My mother was very well dressed, very, like high society, but very religious. And they used to go, apparently the habit there was that you went spaziering, went for a walk there was a special area where you went for a walk, and that's when you dressed up to kill. My father had 2 businesses. He had a factory which was spinning and weaving mills, and he also had a retail shop, a double-front retail shop, and that was my parents' parnassa. I remember going to shul with my father, and my father had a beautiful voice. I remember that when we sat at the dinner table, we sang Zmirot with my parents, on Shabbos only. And I remember he had an operatic voice. My father, Alav Shalom, was strict. We were brought up strictly, as many of the families in those days were brought up strict, not just let the kids go. And we had certain things that we had to go to bed at a certain time, we had to eat at a certain time, And he wasn't strict, he never hit us or smacked us or anything, but he threatened us. But he used to say, now you're going to get into trouble. And then he started playing with his schleikes, and it took him an hour, and he pretended he couldn't get them off. But we already knew that we have to behave. And my mother, she was softer. I mean, she was a bit more of a walkover. I think also because she was more busy. She didn't have time to argue with us. She had lots of children. I went to Jewish school. We all went to Jewish school before the war. I remember learning Yiddish songs, and my father sang Yiddish songs. Auf dem Pripetschek, have you ever heard of it? Auf dem Pripetschek brennt das Feuer und in Stub ist heiß und der Rebbe lernt mit kleine Kinder lach den Olefbeet und der Rebbe lernt mit kleine Kinder lach den Olefbeet. Maria Wohlschläger was the name of the nanny. And she was a Catholic, a Slovak Catholic. And she loved us. She was there from before we were born. And she was treated very well, and she loved the job, and we were happy with her. And we played with her, really. With her and with my siblings and my cousins. I don't recall friends coming in to play with us, because when you have your cousins there and all the facilities for playing, you didn't need to bring in anybody else. We were eating with the nanny, and then we came into the dining room where my parents were eating, the adults were eating, and we used to say kiss die Hand, you know, and go to bed. Shabbat was, we were allowed to come into the dining room and eat with my parents. That was the big thing of Shabbat, that privilege. And it sounds terrible, as parents didn't have the children eating with them, but Shabbat and Chagim was the only time we were allowed to eat with my parents. Kids when parents were sort of separated in those days. The Zionism in our family was really opposed more, probably. My father was always, and my parents were always poor, but before the war, I didn't intend to come to Eretz Israel. There was no discussion about it, to the best of my knowledge. I don't think many people did, but I knew about it because obviously he sent all his people here and his wife's family here, so we knew what Eretz Israel was, and we would have come if we had had a chance. But he wouldn't leave because of his parents. And then it was too late. the Nazi occupation of Slovakia in 1939, I was 5 years old. We went, as usual, to the park next to the President's Palace, and there was a big sign, Jews and dogs not allowed. Jewish businesses were taken away immediately and given to non-Jews, and the Jew was kept in the business only as such until such time that the new owner could run the business. And my father had a very big business, not only the spinning and weaving mills, but also a retail shop. And a Slovak non-Jew was put into the business, and the Jews were kept in the business, the Jewish owner were kept in the business, and I had a piece of paper which said that this is to certify that the Jew, Eugen Weiss, is an essential Jew, meaning he's essential to the economy, and therefore is allowed to walk in the street and shouldn't be arrested. And so is his wife, Margaret Weiss, and his children, and all our names were on this card. At some stage my father was arrested, like most Jews. They wanted a big ransom, and to get that ransom paid, my mother managed to sell this retail business, a shop, the Bratja Weiss, the Brüder Weiss, and by this stage my uncle had already been deported and probably murdered. Now when my father found out about this, that's when he decided to send his children out of the country because it's no longer safe. Now, in 1942, deportations to Auschwitz were taking place, and a few people, young men and women who were in Auschwitz when it was being built, have managed to escape, came to Czechoslovakia. My parents hid them and then organized for them to get out. And they told them what was happening in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and that's how my parents found out that Auschwitz-Birkenau was built an extermination camp where everybody is meant to be murdered on arrival, men, women and children. So in 1942, my parents decided that it is no longer safe to be in hiding even in Czechoslovakia. And so my father and mother started to send the children to Hungary to be adopted to family and the relatives who on arrival will adopt them. But the law was you can send Jewish children to Hungary from the Hungarian point of view, but you couldn't send Jewish children out of Czechoslovakia legally and officially. So imagine what it consisted of, that my parents and others like them, they had to find a non-Jew who had a child or children similar to your own child on their passport, and who for a lot of money would take your child across the border and deliver them in Hungary to the family as their child. But it wasn't only the money, that you had to find somebody first who with such a situation, and that you had to pay a lot of money for them. You were putting your child into the hands of a total stranger. They could do anything to your child once they were in their hands. And I was sent to an uncle, a young couple that didn't have children yet, in Hungary, in a place called Sárvár, and they adopted me legally as their child. I was happy there. I was happy there, as happy as a child can be away from parents. And they were very good to me, and they're very nice to me, and they're nice people, and the place was nice. I didn't hear from my parents. There was no communication because they were scared that I will be caught. The communication will be caught somehow. So there was no communication with me at all for 2 years. In 1944, when the Nazis invaded Hungary, the Jews were instantaneously put into a ghetto. And when my parents heard that all the children that were in different parts of Hungary, that had been sent to Hungary for safety, were in ghettos, and they had no control over them there, they had to then find somebody whom they could send to bring us back from the ghetto to the safety. But were in control of Bratislava. And they sent a woman to pick me up, and her job was only to take me to Budapest, not to take me to my parents. Not all the way. That had to be somebody else. So she delivered me to Budapest, and in Budapest she handed me over to a man who was taking 30 people, including small children, on foot through the wheat fields and the cornfields. And then they delivered us somewhere he delivered us somewhere in Bratislava. I don't know that. I don't remember the arrival even in Bratislava. And my parents, then I met Eva. I hadn't seen her the whole war. And they sent us with the nanny to ניטרה. And the story was that we had evacuated Catholic children whose parents were killed in an air raid, and the only survivor was our older sister, and she's sending us to a place called small like ניטרה because it's safer. And that was our cover. We went to school 6 days a week with all the other children. We went on Sunday to church with them, but when we got into trouble, not only didn't they help us, but they actually denounced us. But we were two little religious children from a religious home. Our only connection with our parents were through letters with the nanny. We wrote to them, and then they wrote back and sent it to the nanny. My sister, she happened to be supposed to have been 13, and she was in class with the daughter of the top SS in ניטרה. So what does a Jewish child do in hiding? She makes chutzpah, she makes friends with this girl because that would be a good cover. So she became very good friends with the girl. She used to go to her place, the girl used to come to our apartment, and we thought we were safe. And somehow this SS found out that he was positive that we are Aryans, we are Catholics. Because we didn't look Jewish. We both had blonde hair and green eyes. So we didn't look Jewish at all. And he found out that Eva plays a very good game of chess. So he used to come, whenever was free, he used to come and play chess with her. And while he played chess, he gave us, very interesting information. He gave us information. Once he said to Eva, around Rosh Hashanah time, he said, it's the Jewish New Year, which is followed 10 days later, that's how much they knew, by their holiest day, their Day of Atonement. And all the Jews in Bratislava, the deportation had stopped, and most of them were in hiding, that were still alive. He said, and for their New Year and this Day of Atonement, they will come out of hiding like rats out of their holes. And that's when we are going to make Bratislava Judenfrei. And my sister sent a coded message to my parents about it. My parents were by this stage in hiding in Bratislava. And my father went out of hiding and went everywhere where he knew that somebody's a Jew, even if people who lived outside, to warn the congregation not to go to Shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And true to his word, the last old age home in Bratislava, the last an orphanage in Bratislava that was still going, and anybody that I could catch were arrested, sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau, murdered on arrival. We were in church on Sunday, 8th of October 1944. We were coming home from church with all the other people. We stopped outside our house, and we saw a truckload of 22 fully armed soldiers coming past, and everybody who was on the way home from church stopped to wish them good luck, because they assumed that they were going to the front to fight. And unfortunately for us, they stopped outside our apartment building. Now, that's the only time that Eva didn't obey my father's instructions. We were told that if we are in trouble in any way, we just go to the telephone, send a coded telephone message to the nanny, which meant that we are caught, and then go straight to the station separately and make our way back to Bratislava to the nanny. However, Eva was positive that the SS, who was her friend's father, was going to cover for us. She went back to the apartment. She sent me to send a message to the nanny and then go to the station to go back to Bratislava. She went back to try and brazen it out, because she knew that without in this apartment there was a fake room which was full of very expensive small pieces of materials, which the nanny, my parents didn't have any more money at this stage, which the nanny used to come, pretend she's visiting her little sisters, but in fact she sold it, went to sell it, because my father bought her an apartment and started a textile business with her name. And when she sold these materials, with that money she went to all the places where some of the children are hidden. And Eva was positive that it's a good enough cover, and that we will vouch for our Christianity, because he thought that Eva was a perfect 16-year-old who would make a perfect match for his 19-year-old Toteskopf son, who was in Auschwitz. And he intended to take us December 44 to Berlin to meet this good shidduch for Eva. And so we thought that he will vouch for us, but unfortunately, when we needed him, he was out of town and he couldn't vouch for us, and so we were arrested. By the time they brought me back from where I had gone to the other side to the park, all our properties was on the top of the truck. Everything had been thrown out, all the materials, all the textiles, and they'd beaten Eva, they'd beaten her up, and she was thrown on the top of the truck, and so was I when I was brought back, and then we were arrested. We were taken from there, and we were arrested, and we were taken in ניטרה to a place where I had still the last few Jews that I could catch, and we were beaten woken up every night to be interrogated. Eva was taken out and beaten, and then she was interrogated to admit that she's Jewish, and she didn't. And while she was interrogated, a woman, an inmate, who was Jewish, we were told she was Jewish and that she's a prisoner like we are, was taken to me, and she tried to get me to give myself away that we are Jewish. And she kept on saying, you can tell me, I'm a prisoner like you. And she showed me Jewish articles, and the idea was that I promised her that if she gets me to admit we are Jewish, she will be released. And the first night that she showed me tefillin, and I said it was a toy. And there was a young boy, I can't remember his name, he was about 17, 18, I think. he, when he saw that I was hesitating, he would stop me from giving myself away. The second night she showed me a talit and said, look, what do you think it is? And I said, it's a blanket, only because he egged me on not to give myself away. And the third night, I was that much more tired because I'd been woken up 3 nights in a row, and she showed me a menorah, which is what we call now Chanukah. And I was more tired than the nights before, and she kept on and on that I can tell her. She's Jewish and a prisoner. And I started giving myself away. I was about to say menorah. And the boy said, don't tell her, she's a spy. She reported him. He was taken out. He was beaten, I think, to a pulp. All I know is that he was brought back as a bloody mess to teach us that this is what happens to you if you disobey. And that's how we were arrested. And from there we were taken to Seret sometime later. And from Seret, when there were had enough people, we were sent to Auschwitz-Birkena. The condition in the train was dreadful. We were bumper to bumper, you were body to body. Some people who died in the train couldn't even fall down because there was not enough room on the ground for them to fall down. I remember vividly a young woman with a baby who didn't stop crying, and she tried to feed the baby, but obviously she had no milk left or whatever. And then the child was crying and screaming, and then suddenly it stopped, and we looked down and the baby was dead. They picked me up and asked me to tell them what I can see from the window of the compartment, and I said, I think it was Auschwitz-Birknaau. And what else can you see? And I said, I can see a lot of smoke in the air. And I gave the explanation that these were the gas chambers. My sister Eva and I arrived in Auschwitz-Birknaau on the 3rd of November, 1944. We finally arrived in Auschwitz and we stopped, and then we were pushed out of the train. It was very high up. We were pushed out. Some people fell, were trampled. It didn't matter. And we were met by German, the Alsatian dogs, going completely berserk and trying to get to the people to attack them. And finally, when they made a bit of order, they ordered us to line up. And if I remember correctly, we lined up and we were told to march behind, to start walking towards the gentleman at the end. And then we were told by a young man, my sister was told, when you walk past the gentleman at the other end, who is Mengele, tell him how old are you? And she said 13. And he told her, tell them that you are 16. So Eva was sent to one side, and I was whistled or pushed with a baton to the other side. And of course I started crying because I was scared to be alone. And somebody told us to go to each other. At one stage we were finally sent together into the same barrack. We were first sent to what used to be the original women's camp on the left of the entrance from the rampa. And the men and women were still together for a little while. And as soon as we arrived, we were called out and we were given a pep talk. One cough, your death. One louse, your death. And this was in a place where all the clothes, we hadn't got the clothes yet, but all the clothes that we were given subsequently could stand up by themselves because they were so full of lice. And how could you not get a cough in a place where it's so cold and you're walking with rags, if you were lucky, with rags on your feet in snow. And so that was extracurricular sadism, to frighten, to put it mildly, the hell out of you. And I had long plaids, and I got worried that, of course, that I'm going to have lice in them very quickly. And so Eva found from somebody something to cut my plaid off. She managed to cut my first plaid off, and then we were called on C-Lapel. So I had to go out like that. And then she managed to find whatever, somebody gave her a scissors or something to cut the second plaid off. This was just an introduction. Some days later, we don't know how long it took, we were told to go to the other side of the camp, across the sewer that was running, open sewer was running through the camp the whole time. And it had a bridge across it, or rather not a bridge, it had just planks of wood on it, and two guards were guarding it. Suffice it to say that they were laughing, and one of them said, let's have a bit of fun. I'll push the small one into the sewer, and we'll have a bet how long it takes her to sink. And even though we understood what they said, we weren't in a position not to go, because once you were told to do something, you had to do it. So, and true to their threat, as we got onto the bridge, one of them pushed me into the sewer. I didn't drown only because the sewer was, too thick to actually sink in. And a young boy, inmate from on the other side of the camp, against the rules, jumped into the sewer and pulled me out. And they took me back to the left side, and they gave up their morning coffee, which is all that I got, to wash me off, because we didn't have any water to wash me off with. After that, at some stage, we were told again to go to the other side. At one stage, we were tattooed. Once you were there, it was very difficult to keep track of what was happening. We were tattooed at one stage. I remember starting to cry because it's a very deep tattoo. It's not a superficial one. And somebody was holding my hand to make it taut, and I was crying, and the person who was Jewish, who was tattooing me, I remember distinctly, said to me, don't cry, because if you're getting a tattoo, that means they'll keep you alive at least 1 week. So don't cry. Food was twice a day. In the morning you got slop, which was supposed to be coffee, and a slice of bread, which became thinner every day because the person who was cutting it, the blockeltester who was cutting the bread, stole more so that which she can then exchange for whatever she wanted, cigarettes or something else. And in the evening you got slop and another piece of bread. And the slop was, if you were very lucky, something floated on top of it, but most of the time it was just slop, literally slop with nothing in it. We had to be out of the barracks all day, hail, rain or shine. And what was the disadvantage? First of all, that you were outside, and secondly, that everything that you did that was in the camp was deliberately made to make your life a misery and to kill you. To be honest with you, I don't know how anybody survived. When they were ready to take the children on the truck and take us to Mengele, I didn't want to go because I knew Mengele was danger, but apart from that, I didn't want to be separated from Eva. So I hung back and by that time it happened, by the time they were ready to take us to Mengele's experimental barracks, it was already dark. And so, because I knew that I'm going to be separated from Eva, I hung back, and I managed to go into the snow. And when the truck was ready to take the children to Mengele, I managed to jump on a truck and waiting till it goes, and that saved me from being taken to Mengele the first time. But eventually, Eva and I were both taken to Mengele and did experiments on us. We never found out what he gave us. He injected us. First he took me, actually I was sent. And Eva was terribly upset, tried to stop them from taking me, but she couldn't. And when I came back a few days later, she asked me what happened, what did I do to me. And I told them that they gave me injections, which were very painful, and they gave me stomach aches, and I was in agony. And then they sent me back to Eva's, and then Eva was taken a few days later, or a week later, and she got the same treatment, and they took our blood. I was very, very scared. I was very, very scared when Eva wasn't right next to me, because I was scared we will be separated. And for instance, when she was taken to get injections, or she was taken, we didn't go, he didn't take us together. Mengele didn't take us together, he took us separately. And of course I was, every minute that she was away from me, I was scared, and she was scared when I was away from her. But yeah, I was lucky. Under the circumstances, I was lucky that the madman, allowed me to be near my sister the whole time in the revier, because it wasn't the usual thing. But I don't remember the details. I just remember the pain, and I remember the injections, and I remember him coming, and then you wanted to die anyway as soon as you saw him. I remember praying, and that's what calmed me down in Auschwitz, and it's the only prayer I knew was Avinu Malkeinu. And I prayed that religiously every day, sometimes more than once, because that calmed me down. I'm not sure how much I understood. I was a kid, after all. I didn't understand the nitty-gritty of dehumanization. You just were in this nightmare. I'm sure Eva would have felt more because she was that much older. But I don't recall these feelings. I just recall fright, being terribly frightened, and being hungry, and being cold. You learned that you can do things which are legitimate for you to survive, and you learned that there were things that you couldn't do. It wasn't legitimate, even if it meant your survival. And that was with the food, and that was with clothing. And it was with everything in camp. But it was a different world. It wasn't from this world, Auschwitz. We assumed the whole time we were in Auschwitz that my parents we didn't even think that they were anywhere. We thought that they were safe the whole time. And so we didn't even think about that. We assumed that the whole time that we were in Auschwiz-BiRkenau, and we were not the only ones, other people too, assumed that the war will end, a truck will come to pick us up, or we will be put on a train, and we will go back to our parents, and we'll go back to Palisade 60, and we will find everything as it was before the war. Now, it occurred to us that it will be anything else. And we thought we'll find all our family. And that's what kept us going. If not for this hope of finding people, for the hope that everything will be the same. was skin and bones, literally skin and bones. And to tell you all the truth, I don't think we will survive. I never. We assumed that we had to believe we will survive, but when we were liberated, that's when I thought we will die. We came back to Bbratislava, and I thought he looked good already after the war. My mother, I don't think she recognized us, really. Well, from what I remember, my mother, when we walked in, I mean, she was flabbergasted, but I remember seeing her, and she had this new baby in her arms, my little sister. We just couldn't believe we actually made it, and that we found each other. It's beyond words to describe what you felt like when you got back. But as I said, but we couldn't go in. We weren't allowed to stay home because we had TB. So we weren't. That was the extra trauma. When Eva and I came, and my sister Eva and I came back to Bratislava finally from Auschwitz, and after Auschwitz, you know, we waited there, and the hitchhiking, and we could not go and stay with our parents because we both had TB, and it was terribly infectious. So we just saw my parents, but we didn't actually go and live with them. We were immediately sent to the Tatra mountains to recuperate, because that was the only thing that you could do for TB. My father never stopped crying for his family and for his children. We never mentioned the word Auschwitz to my parents, ever. My father died in 1984, my mother died in 1994. The word Auschwitz never passed our lips to them. Not a word about what happened there. We never told them anything, nothing. Because we didn't have the heart to tell them such a thing, that I should be hurt. Harold and I met in Sydney. We got married in December 1957. We have 3 beautiful children. I'm allowed to say daughters. 14 beautiful grandchildren. 12 of them live in Israel, thank God. And we have, bli ein hara, many great grandchildren. My husband told me that when we got married, the beginning when we got married, there wasn't a night that I didn't cry in my sleep. It affects you, and it has affected me, and it has affected my children. There's no question that every person who went through the war was affected by it, adult, child, woman, man, and not only them, but also their family. And a second generation. My children are what? They were brought up with this. The poor kids never heard anything else. So it affects all the families. I have no doubt about it that the whole family is affected.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the State of Israel and in the name of the Jewish people, Miss Mrta Wייס.
As a 10-year-old in Auschwitz, I never dreamt I would survive, let alone have the privilege and joy of living in our ancient land, in our country, in the state of Israel, with our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. 71 years ago, there was no United Nations. Today, I ask you, the United Nations, to put an end to anti-Semitism and baseless hatred and the persecution of innocent people all around the world. Thank you.